Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderers stalking the streets of New Orleans. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Angel Heart. This 1987 neo-noir psychological horror film follows a private detective from Brooklyn named Harry Angel, who's been contracted by a mysterious egg-eating man named Louis Cypher. Angel is tasked with finding a missing singer named Johnny Favorite, and the search takes him through a secret world of black magic and voodoo. The more Harry uncovers, the more he becomes involved in a string of murders in Louisiana, and he learns the hellish truth is closer than he ever imagined. Angel Heart was written and directed by Sir Alan Parker, who has brought us films like Pink Floyd The Wall, Burning Mississippi, and Midnight Express. The story is based on the 1978 novel by William Hortzberg, Falling Angel. The author had been trying to adapt the book to screen for a while, but it wasn't until he met up with Parker that the ball got rolling. With permission from the author, Parker made some small and big changes to the story, most notably the title. The film itself has a small but absurdly baller cast, starring Mickey Rourke from The Wrestler and Sin City as Harry Angel, Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver and Raging Bull as Louis Cypher, Lisa Bonet from High Fidelity and The Cosby Show as Epiphany Proudfoot, and Charlotte Rampling from Dune and Benedetta as Margaret Krusemark. Cinematography was handled by Michael Saracen of films like War for the Planet of the Apes and The Prisoner of Azkaban, and the score was composed by Trevor Jones of Labyrinth and The Last of the Mohicans. The soundtrack also includes a number of blues and R&B songs from artists like Bessie Smith, Laverne Baker, Courtney Pine, and it even features Brownie McGee as a character named Toots. The film was shot on site throughout various locations in New York and New Orleans, with production designer Brian Morris altering the settings to fit the 1950s vibes. The film faced a little bit of controversy, with the MPAA forcing Parker to remove 10 seconds from a sex scene to avoid an X rating, but other than that, it stayed mostly intact. Angel Heart debuted at number 4 at the box office, ultimately bringing in $17 million. That was actually a flop for it though, as it had a budget of $18 million to make up. Initial reactions among critics were mixed, as they generally praised Rourke's performance, as well as the score, cinematography, and production design, while criticism was aimed at Parker's screenwriting for being convoluted and exposition heavy. Although it currently has an 82 and 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as a 3.6 on Letterboxd, so it seems to have only gained adoration through the years. In fact, Christopher Nolan has cited it as one of the most impactful films on him, and Wired considers it to be the 22nd best horror film of all time. I guess I've been missing out all these years because I've never seen it before. Thank you so much to my patron Nitpicks for requesting Angel Heart for me to review. I've purposefully avoided as many spoilers as I can so I can give it a proper fresh watch, and at the moment I'm expecting something along the lines of Manhunter and maybe a little bit of Jacob's Ladder, but I really don't know what to expect. But with all of that said, it's probably time we get started. Go grab some crawdads, folks, because we're watching Angel Heart. The movie opens in the dark as a voice whispers, "Johnny, Johnny," and we enter a freezing alley as two gang members diss each other. Dog, the OG greaser, scares off the competition, meaning he's got dibs on the dead lady. She ain't important to the plot as far as I can tell, we're just setting the mood, baby. The year's 1955 and we're in the Big Apple, and we meet our protagonist, Harry Angel. He's a private detective and has been contacted by an attorney named Winesap, as one of his clients, Louis Cypher, is hoping to use his services. Harry heads over to Harlem to meet Mr. Cypher, stopping to watch a preacher coax money out of his patrons. "Join the Patreon for eternal salvation!" He follows Winesap to the top floor, passing by a supposed suicide on the way up. Now we meet Louis Cypher, an eccentric gentleman who loves long nails and pentagrams. Yeah, this guy's got evil written all over him, but he's also got cold hard cash and a job for Harry.
Do you by chance remember the name Johnny Favorite?
Remember the name Johnny? No, I don't think so.
He's on the hunt for a guy named Johnny Liebling, commonly known as Johnny Favorite. Before the war, Favorite was a famous crooner.
I gotta figure out how to make money on this thing. It's simply too good.
And Cypher helped support his endeavors at the start. Johnny was drafted in the war and was badly injured though, suffering shell shock and amnesia when he returned. Harry can relate, he too was drafted but quickly injured and was allowed to return home. Favorite wasn't so lucky as he was virtually a zombie upon his return. He was taken to an upstate psychiatric hospital for some kind of radical treatment, but to his knowledge it didn't work. Favorite owes his end of some kind of bargain he made with Cypher, who wants Harry to track him down and confirm whether or not he's still alive. They tried to visit him in the Poughkeepsie hospital he's supposed to be at, but were given the runaround and told to leave. Harry agrees to scope it out himself. He makes his way up to Poughkeepsie and breaks out his fake IDs, using one to pose as a government official to gain access to Favorite's file. He was supposedly transferred out in 1943, but the note being written in ballpoint pen indicates that it wasn't. He was supposedly transferred out in 1943, but the note being written in ballpoint pen indicates that it was written retroactively, as ballpoints didn't become common until the 50s. The more you know. Harry uses the phone book to track down Favorite's doctor, Albert Fowler. He breaks into the old man's filthy home and quickly discovers he's addicted to morphine and steals it from the hospital. Fowler arrives home to find the detective slurping up his milk, and Harry presses him on Favorite's location. The doc says Johnny was transferred to a hospital in Albany, but Harry has checked and confirmed he was never sent there. Fowler admits to faking the transfer paperwork because Favorite recently had a pair of visitors, aka Cypher, and he didn't know how to explain that he was gone. He says 12 years ago, a man named Edward Kelly and an unknown young woman paid him $25,000 to pretend Favorite was still a patient there, while they supposedly took him back home down south. Favorite underwent a bunch of facial reconstruction at the hospital, so Fowler has no idea what he even looks like, and the doc starts to fade while recalling what Kelly looked like. Harry decides to wean Fowler off the morphine by locking him in his bedroom while he goes to get a cheeseburger. Good work, detective. We hear an intense heartbeat as Harry hears the voice whispering to Johnny from a church, and an elevator opens up for him. Yeah, maybe next time. Harry selfishly eats the burger off screen, but when he returns, he finds the good doctor with a bullet in his brain. Looks like the old man always stayed strapped with his handy bullet Bible. Harry wipes away any fingerprints he may have left and skedaddles. Back in the Big Apple, Harry meets with Cypher at a bistro. He fills him in on the situation and Favorite's possible hideaway down south, and Cypher is confident that Harry can find him.
Well, you know what they say about slugs. They always leave slime in their tracks.
Angel don't mess with possible murder charges though and says he's out, but Cypher is able to talk him back with an immediate payment of $5,000.
You know, some religions think that the egg is the symbol of the soul. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Weird flex, but you do you, Cypher, my boy. Later that day, Harry sees the blood has been cleaned and the church below where he met Cypher has a taxidermy monkey and a bunch of voodoo-looking shit. While that despicable priest gets carried around like a king, Harry finds a cloaked figure alone in the church. But before he can see who it is, Harry gets jumped by some henchmen. They chase him through the building and eventually into the street where he's able to lose them in the parade. Harry meets with a news reporter he pays to dig up dirt on certain cases, who does have some info on Johnny Favorite. We learn he used to be in a band called the Spider Simpson Orchestra, of which Spider is the only living member left. There's also a picture of Favorite with a musician named Toots Sweet, although he's been out of the spotlight for years. The big breakthrough is she learned Favorite was engaged to a rich woman named Margaret Kruzmark, whose father Ethan practically owns half of Louisiana. It didn't work out and she went back home to Daddy, and it seems she was into witchcraft and was known to cast spells on people. Harry has a vision of a big New Year's Eve crowd and another spooky elevator with a cloaked figure emerging from it, and a single apartment glowing red someone is screaming inside of. Uh-oh. Harry meets with Spider, who shares that Toots' suite is down in New Orleans. He suspects he'll be able to find Margaret Krusemark and maybe even Johnny down there as well. Spider also mentioned that Johnny had a secret lover named Evangeline Proudfoot. The only other person Favorite saw frequently before his accident was a palm reader called Madame Zora, who a very funny Coney Island couple are able to shed some light on. Johnny visited Madame Zora's booth on the boardwalk all the time, and her real name is Margaret Krusemark. Dun dun dun. All signs are pointing to New Orleans, so Harry hops on the next train to the tap dancing, jazz thumping Wonderland. He quickly finds Toots' new venue, as well as Madame Krusemark's new palm reading service. He follows her around town a while before stopping by her apartment/office, where he pretends to be interested in a reading. He immediately takes interest in a dagger and starts tipping on the piano, and Krusemark asks if he performs at all. She also takes down some of his personal info, which she'll need for some spiritual investigation into his future. He gives her all of Johnny Favorite's info, like his date of birth, quickly deciding to quit his act and spill the beans about why he's here. She tells him that Johnny Favorite is dead, or at the very least dead to her, and asks him to leave. He's disappointed he won't get to hold her hand during a palm reading, but Margaret doesn't think he'll like what she sees. He also notices a familiar looking necklace before heading out. Next, he stops by a herbal medicine store that used the same name as Evangeline Proudfoot's old one in Harlem, where he learns that Proudfoot died while waiting for her lover to return to her. Harry rents a car and heads to Almondville, the rural town that Proudfoot is buried in. At the cemetery, he watches a young woman and her baby stop by her grave, who seem to be Evangeline's daughter and grandson. He greets the wet-haired woman, whose name is Epiphany, and her very unhappy son.
Your mama left you with a very beautiful name, Epiphany.
Not much else.
She confirms that her mother is dead, and he comes up close and personal with his personal nemesis.
I met all Mama's friends. I never met anyone called Favorite.
Oh, shit, man. I got a thing about chickens.
Epiphany doesn't know anything about a Johnny Favorite or a Toots suite, but Harry gives her his hotel number just in case. That night he visits the Red Rooster to see Toots perform, and he manages to chat him up at the bar. Toots vaguely remembers Johnny, but says they weren't buddy-buddy or anything, and he's quickly suspicious of Harry's questions. Angel follows him into the bathroom and watches him get spooked by a severed chicken foot, but before he can question him further, the bouncer throws Harry out onto the street. It'll take more than that to dissuade Harry though, and he waits until the club closes and Toots makes his exit. We follow him out to the woods where he, Epiphany, and many others have gathered for some kind of voodoo ritual. It's got bongos, dead chickens, dry humping, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, I'll see my white ass out. Toots comes home to an unwanted visitor, but the old man keeps that straight razor ready to go. Harry eventually beats him down and demands answers about what he just saw, and Toots says that Epiphany is a Mambo priestess just like her mother. He still declares he hasn't seen Johnny since before the war, although the chicken foot was a warning to keep his mouth shut about something. He's got a familiar looking star on one of his teeth as well. Harry gives Toots his number and tells him to follow up, stuffing the note in his mouth. On the way out, Harry drops the bloody razor, and we get another shot of that spooky elevator. Now he's covered in blood and back at the church, once again trying to glimpse the cloaked figure. Harry starts bleeding profusely as the heartbeat intensifies, but he wakes to find 2 cops in his bedroom before he can identify the figure. These boys are investigating the murder of Toots Sweet, who just last night had his dick cut off and shoved down his throat. That ought to keep his big mouth shut. Angel shares that he interviewed Toots for a private investigation, but can't share what about. The cops plan to reach out to Winesap, and Harry has another vision. He's back down the elevator and strolling through the 1943 New Year's, and he seems to approach a young soldier in the crowd. Harry returns to Margaret's only to find that she is dead too. Looks like someone used that dagger to cut her heart out. Also take note of the tiny vase, people. It may be important. Oh, we also have a petrified human hand. Nice. Harry erases any evidence of his presence and gets the fuck out. He's heading back to Almondville when he notices he's being tailed, and when he stops at a Cajun seafood shop, two men release a pit bull on him. No, not the crawdads! They tell him Ethan Kruzmark wants him on the first train to New York, or else Cujo over here is gonna eat his face. Does Harry go home? No. Does Harry visit the sexy voodoo priestess? Take a wild guess. He tells her what he saw in the woods and accuses her of setting Toots up to be killed, as she was the only one who knew Harry was meeting him. She admits sending the chicken foot, but says her people don't just go around murdering each other. She also admits to knowing of Johnny Favorite, as he is in fact Epiphany's father. The plot thickens, or should I say chickens. She never met the guy, as he never returned home from the war and her mama did die waiting for him. Instead of pushing further, Harry flirts her up a bit, telling her to call him with or without more info. Good work, detective. Harry gets word that his egg-eating customer is in town, and the two meet at an extravagant church.
Dead bodies, Mr. Saphir. Murders.
Murders?
Yeah.
Harry fills him in on Fowler, Toots, and Margaret's murders, explaining that it's all wrapped up in some religious cult or conspiracy. Harry's best guess is Johnny's killing his old acquaintances, but he has no idea why. He believes he's being set up as the fall guy and doesn't want to take the blame for a bunch of shit he doesn't even believe in.
Who the fuck are you, Cypher?
Watch your language.
Harry finds Epiphany outside his room and lets her in, as she can finally admit she's scared of everything that's going on. She shares that she is 17, which from what I can tell was the consenting age in 1955, so I'll leave that up to your judgment, and he asks how she ended up with a child so young. She never knew the father, as she was supposedly impregnated by the gods during a ritual called Chevalier. Apparently it wasn't as virginal as Jesus' conception though. Now we're treated to an extended sex scene between Harry and the 17-year-old Epiphany, which I obviously cannot show you. But as the two near climax, the leaking ceiling starts to rain blood. We also get visions of blood being cleaned after some kind of ritual involving the soldier, and it looks like Winesap got murdered as well. In reality, Harry is strangling the screaming woman, but he comes to and stops. She's concerned, but not nearly concerned enough. That morning the police swing by, and they ain't happy to see this multicolor relationship. Damn, Colonel Sanders drops the fucking hard R. It is the 1950s South after all. They don't care how many black people get murdered, but now that a rich white woman is dead, things are being taken much more seriously. Inside, Epiphany is singing one of Johnny's tunes, and Harry starts disassociating. He attacks the Kruzmark lackeys and winds up getting stuck under a dead horse, but fortunately the pit bull gets yeeted by a stray hoof. Hey chickens, I'm walking here, you know? Harry tracks down Ethan Kruzmark at a fucking cockfight / horse race, and accuses him of being the so-called Mr. Kelly that picked up Johnny from the hospital. Kruzmark invites him inside for some gumbo, although the Brooklyn boy passes. Never pass up on the gumbo. Ethan admits to picking up Johnny and paying Fowler to cover it up, as his daughter had some kind of hocus-pocus idea to help him. It involved the Hand of Glory, that severed hand in Margaret's studio. Apparently it was cut off a convicted murderer while he was hanged, and it can apparently open doors to the soul. Ethan admits to worshipping the Prince of Darkness and getting his daughter in on the practice as well, and he's also the one who introduced Margaret to Johnny. Ethan himself watched Johnny conjure the devil and sell his soul for fame and glory. Johnny hit the big time but tried to trick Satan by stealing someone else's soul. He selected a male victim the same age as him, and with the help of Toots, he kidnapped a soldier during New Year's Eve 1943. They took him back to Johnny's hotel, performed some rituals, and Margaret provided a virgin dagger to cut out the soldier's heart and eat it while it was still beating. Johnny took the soul of the young man and planned to start over, but next thing you know, he was drafted and got shell shock in the war. He returned to the States not even knowing who he was.
Where's the boy? Only Johnny knew. He sealed the dog tags in a vase and gave it to Margaret.
Told ya. They found Johnny and dropped him off in Times Square, hoping he would regain his memories there, but that didn't seem to work. Harry just about figures out the truth but refuses to believe it, and he finds Daddy Krusemark drowned in his own gumbo. He rushes back to Margaret's place and finds the vase, cracking it open and finding the dog tags. I'll give y'all 3 guesses on whose name is in the dog tags. That's right, Harry was the soldier Johnny picked up and murdered. So Harry is actually Johnny, but the shell shock jumbled things up and caused him to believe that he is still simply Harry Angel. Louis Cypher, or Lucifer as Harry piecing his name together calls him, appears.
Louis Cypher. Lucifer. Even your name is a dime store joke.
But Harry refuses to buy that he's the real deal. He insists that he knows who he is and argues that Cypher is the killer and is trying to pin it all on him. Cypher admits he was a guiding force in the murders, but tells Johnny that Fowler, Toots, Margaret, and Krusemark all died by his hand. Although he did kill Winesap to keep things hush-hush. He tells Johnny he's been living on borrowed time and another man's memories, and he's been doomed ever since he ate Angel's heart. Cypher describes flesh as weak and temporary, arguing only the soul is immortal.
Yours belongs to me.
I know who I am.
Lucifer throws on his favorite track and snags the dog tags as Harry finally remembers the murders he committed. He realizes he may have also killed Epiphany and rushes to the hotel, where Lucifer in his cloaked disguise is waiting to watch the finale. The police and Epiphany's corpse are waiting there as well, and he admits that she is his daughter. Gross. The other officer brings out his grandson, and they tell Angel he is going to burn for this. Ain't that right, little devil spawn? The movie ends with Harry/Johnny taking that elevator all the way down as he's finally joining Lucifer in hell where he belongs. And that's Angel Heart. Yo, this was fantastic. How had I never seen this before? Even the vibes alone were really up my alley. The syrupy blood, the filthy interiors, the uncontrolled, depraved sexuality, the intense heartbeat sound effect, it all was giving me serious Hellraiser vibes. And they came out the very same year, mind you. Something about 1987 was just extra grimy. I love it. But along with Hellraiser, there's also similarities to The Ninth Gate, Jacob's Ladder, Cure, Videodrome, Seven, and even the original Child's Play, and for me, that's a great list of films to be in company with. And this came before most of those. I can certainly see some of the imprints from earlier neo-noir and psychological horror films, things like Rosemary's Baby, but I can absolutely see the impression that Angel Heart had on the genre afterwards as well. I'm going to go through a simplified recap of everything that happened, as it can be a bit hard to follow. So, Johnny Favorite was a Satanist who sought fame and glory. He met up with other believers down in New Orleans, including Ethan, his daughter Margaret, as well as Toots Sweet. Favorite and Margaret became an item, although he was secretly seeing Evangeline Proudfoot as well. Favorite ultimately conjured up the devil and sold his soul to him for fame and glory, an act that at the very least Ethan was there to see. Johnny hit it big as a crooner, but soon realized the cost of his fame and sought a way to escape his fate. Margaret came across the Hand of Glory, and Favorite came across a ritual that would allow him to steal someone else's soul. Hoping he could essentially hide his own within a victim, he and Toots picked up a young Harry Angel in Times Square. They used the Hand of Glory to open the door to Harry's soul and used a virgin dagger to cut out his heart. Johnny ate it, stealing his soul. He believed that he effectively tricked the devil, but with some bad luck, Harry Angel, who he now has to live as, was drafted in World War II. He got mighty fucked up both physically and mentally, returning with amnesia and disfigurement. Ethan placed him in Fowler's hospital, where he did receive facial reconstruction, but the only memories that could be recovered were Harry's. Margaret and Ethan picked up Johnny and dropped him off in New York, hoping his real memories would return. He was still bandaged up when they took him, so they never saw his new face. Kinda seems like an oversight in my opinion, but whatever. They returned home to New Orleans, and at some point they figured he was either dead or would never be the Johnny they knew. So Johnny, who now knew himself as Harry Angel, simply started a life as a private detective, having no memory of being kidnapped and murdered or being the one who kidnapped and murdered him. All was well until the devil finally found his missing soul, at which point he sent Harry on a journey to find himself. In the process, he manipulates him into killing all of his colleagues that played a part in his trick. Oh, he also fucked Johnny's daughter and gave her an evil baby, but that's somehow the least consequential part of the story. In the end, Johnny remembers who he is and the crimes he committed, and sure, he'll get the death penalty. Lucifer got the last laugh, cleaning up his messy accounts and making his trickster suffer as much as possible along the way. This film is often near the top of the list when it comes to Mickey Rourke's best performances, and I can certainly see why. He does a great job carrying the film as the leading man, bringing so much charisma and such a range of emotion to Harry. He goes from cocky and arrogant to absolutely confused and terrified so fluidly, he really feels like he's cracking under all of the confusion and terror. He also exudes the 1950s Brooklyn gumshoe so well, even watching the ways he behaves in Harlem and Coney Island is really fun. Then seeing how he navigates the Deep South is compelling, moving through the religion and unfiltered racism of the time. His chemistry with Epiphany feels a bit rushed, but overall I can buy their infatuation with each other. Obviously there's a disgusting reality behind that, but I buy it nonetheless. And Lisa Bonet absolutely kills it as Epiphany, working as a clever, alluring, but also deeply human representative for her entire community. This film could have easily fallen all the way into the sexy, violent exoticism of the low-income voodoo-practicing black people, but Epiphany makes it clear that at least most of them are normal people who simply have a different idea of religion and spirituality. And don't even get me started on Robert De Niro here, he steals every scene that he's in. This has to be one of his most forgotten and underseen performances, as I never hear anybody talk about it. I'm not arguing that it's Raging Bull or Taxi Driver level, but he does do a fantastic job of disappearing into this role as Cypher. I'm not used to seeing him with a beard, so if I had just thrown this on randomly and ignored the opening credits, I may not have even realized it was De Niro. I love when a well-known actor can be chameleonic and really disappear into roles, something that someone like The Rock obviously cannot do. The long nails, the egg eating, and everything about Cypher's demeanor make it clear he's up to no good, but his motives are really well hidden on a first watch. I was able to see where the story was going with little hints like Harry also going to war and coming home with shell shock. I've seen enough movies like Shutter Island to understand that he's probably not who he thinks he is. But that didn't make the reveal any less satisfying, and I'd also say the film as a whole is even more satisfying on a secondary watch, as there's so many little hints and Easter eggs thrown in throughout that you wouldn't catch on a first-time viewing. Listening to Cypher a second time around is the most fun, as he's just toying with his food from the very start. So many little things that seem random or unimportant are actually very intentional, and they're oftentimes things Cypher has put in place to try to jog Harry's memory. The blood on the walls was an attempt at visually reminding him of what he'd done, and this plus the slow influx of verbal reminders did begin to coax out little details of his soul stealing. There's of course the intense heartbeat Harry hears throughout, which is the sound of the real Harry's heart as he consumed it. Another unique visual detail is the constant presence of fans. On one end, it's literally a visual reminder to Harry of the fan in the hotel room he performed the ritual in, but it's also a metaphor for the cycle Harry is in as he slowly uncovers the truth of what he's done. I also love the elevator as a simple but effective representation for Johnny's descent into hell. There's a lot of ways that this familiar story of a detective investigating murders and is slowly descending into hell could fall flat. Hellraiser Inferno. But even outside of the terrifying horror sequences, the mystery portion of the film holds up as well. One element I wasn't expecting was the addition of comedy. There's lots of little ironic moments and snarky quips that help keep this from being totally depressing. I also love that this is a period piece to an extent. Placing it in the 50s gives it a setting we usually don't get to see such satanic depravity take place in. All in all, Angel Heart is a really solid neo-noir mystery and a really solid psychological horror. It's got a grimy, dripping, evil atmosphere and a cast of really fun characters to weave together a twisty, turny story that'll leave you guessing up until the very end. I really enjoyed this watch, and I'll definitely be checking it out again in the future. Well, that's about it. Thank you again to my patron Nitpicks for requesting Angel Heart for me to review. This was a ton of fun, and it got me in the mood for more horror mysteries, so throw some of your favorites in down below. And while you're down there, let me know what you think of Angel Heart, because I'd love to talk about it more. Any little details that I missed or didn't include in the video, be sure to share. And be sure to join me in 2 weeks as we check out another exciting patron request. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks so much for watching my review of Angel Heart. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.